afternoon and welcome to today's Corporate Policy Development and Scrutiny panel on Monday the 13th of March. And this is our last panel of this particular makeup. The meeting is currently being webcast, so if you have any issue with that, if you please let us know. Item 2 on the agenda is the emergency evacuation procedure, and I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to read that out. Thank you.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, apologies for absence and substitutions. There aren't any, thank you. Item number 4 are declarations of interest. Are there any panel members that have any declarations of interest to make at this time? No? Thank you. Item number 5 is urgent business agreed by the Chair, and I just want to change the order of the agenda slightly. Item number 12, the panel work plan, as there are no meeting dates arranged due to the local elections, there isn't a panel work plan, so we will be discussing that. And item number 10 and number 11 are going to be reversed, so the Cabinet member update will be item number 10 and the aqueous update will be item number 11. So item number 6, public and councillor statements, and I understand that Mr Goodman is here to make a statement. Can I just make sure that somebody will time for 3 minutes? Lovely. Thank you, Mr Goodman. You have 3 minutes.
Some of the scrutiny panel will know how deeply concerned I am with the council's own development company, which according to the council leader has now morphed into a council housing builder. I have had major concerns ever since the company was set up, and those who were in the previous cabinet on this panel will know that to be the case. I never believe they have shown adequate knowledge of the building industry. I firmly believe this company is not needed, and the work that they currently undertake for this council should be carried out in-house by a department at a fraction of the cost, just like it was in my time. We were run by professionals who would manage an estate substantially bigger than ADL at a fraction of the cost. The huge salaries that these directors take out from the bottom line is quite shameful. I've asked publicly for independent investigations in how the company was being operated to no avail. To read the papers submitted to the panel today are nothing short of hiding the true facts of the company and how it is being run. I see no profit or loss accounts for the individual contracts or even an overall profit and loss accounts. Perhaps that would allow you as a panel to ask questions. I wonder where all the loss on the To Fulfilled application has gone. Easy. The council's picked up the tab, so it won't be seen at all. What about the debacle over the planning list of building application Abbey Chambers? I suspect you do not even know about that. Where are those costs? So much for the item in the report, where they say they will carry out work in accordance with planning permission. Excuse me, members of the panel, isn't that what we all should do? There is further reference that they will comply with planning requirements for energy efficiency. Yes, again, they have to comply with this. This company feels they are above the law. In item 10, it boasts that the loan from the council on Newbridge Hill was repaid in December. No surprise there, when it was sold to them at a £500,000 discount and the council bought it back at market value. ADL as a bank of mum and dad, namely us to bail them out when the going gets tough. I wonder how many of you have visited Slaybook Road. Trumpeted as trumpeted as an exemplar of development, especially on energy efficiency. I wish you, as a scrutiny panel, would go there and talk to those people who have bought their houses. it is beyond what is a true snagging. I know I will make no friends with what I have to say, but I do it because I believe in honesty and urge you not to allow a stone to be unturned despite you coming under significant pressure. You must ask the leader of the council, where is the 100, or is it 133, affordable social houses built by ADL? Perhaps John Darnville is listening to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Does anybody on the panel have any questions? Mr. Goodman, any questions? I just have one question. You made, in your statement, you said that there were issues at Sladebrook. Are you able to elaborate on those?
Those people in the profession, as I have, been told by other professional people serious concerns which has gone on at Sladebrook, to the extent that they've opened up to go into the roof. They weren't allowed to do that in the first place, and it is wringing wet with water because the ventilation system has been incorrectly fixed.
Thank you. Does anybody else in the panel have any questions, Mr. Goodman? No? Right, thank you very much for your statement. So now we'll move on to the minutes, and we have two sets of minutes to approve today, 23rd of January 2023 and the 30th of January 2023. May I ask for confirmation that this is a correct record? May I have a proposer and a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Davis, Councillor McPhee to second. All those in favour? Unanimous for both sets. Yes, I should have taken those separately. So that's for the 23rd of January, and for the 30th of January, may I have a proposer? Councillor Davis, Councillor Singleton. All those in favour? Again, unanimous. Thank you. And we move on to item number 8, which is our economic strategy. And we're delighted to invite Louise Morris to give us a presentation. Thank you very much. Well, Councillor Roper, you're going to introduce this.
Yes, very briefly. Thank you, Chair. The question, I think, would be, why do we need an economic strategy as a council? Because obviously we don't have a huge budget to go out and intervene into marketplaces and in industries and businesses. We can't subsidise. What can we do? Well, we can make a whole series of policy decisions that will influence the economic activity in our region. And an economic strategy informs a lot of the council activity in other areas, whether that be the local plan, whether that be relating to climate emergency and sustainability, whether that be to well-being. And that strategy is a key part of the various functions that the council is involved in. Baines is an important player in the local area. We spend a huge amount of money locally. We are one of the keystone economic units, if you like to call it that way. There's things like the hospital, the university. So we are a huge influence. So it's important that we are very clear about what we want to do and the outcomes we want to produce. There was previously an economic strategy review dating from 2014 relating to the 2008 crash, which Louise is going to cover in a minute. So the latest strategy, which has been worked on since last year, is thinking about the next 10 to 20 years and how we can make interventions and put in policies that will produce the outcomes we want to have, particularly in relation to fairness and sustainability. So I think it's important to say that this is not a grand piece of work that is going to be produced and then stuck on a shelf and forgotten about. The design has been very much centred around what we can deliver and not around great theories. And it is to be produced for the next administration. And there will be a whole series of strategies that can be adopted by that administration, depending on its political makeup, I'm sure, that will be ready to go. So Louise is now going to talk you through the background, the work that's been done, and where we've got to. So if I can hand over to you.
Thank you. Just to introduce myself, my name is Jackie Clayton. I job share with Louise Morris, and we're very interchangeable. But we are jointly head of green transformation within the council. We're reasonably new to the council, so I haven't met a lot of people here. But we also have a role in convening the work that the council's doing on the economic strategy, which is drawing on colleagues across the council because it's a very cross-cutting piece of work. But thank you for having us here today. So as Councillor Roper has said, this is quite an introductory update and early stage in the work. So the things that I will talk through briefly today are some context for the economic strategy work, how we're going about developing the strategy, a little bit of an insight into the evidence base that we're using to inform that work, and also an indication of some of the emerging priorities, draft priorities, as Councillor Roper says, that will be available to an incoming administration to take a view on. So if I start briefly with the context. So as Councillor Roper says, we're under no statutory obligation to produce an economic strategy. We're not doing this because we have to, we're doing it because we want to, and we think it's a very important document to provide that kind of direction and context and a clear steer for the work of the wider council and stakeholders. We last published a strategy in 2014, and since then a lot has changed. So in 2014, we were still dealing with the economic consequences of the 2008 financial crash, and the themes that our strategy addressed then were really around economic growth with a focus on innovation and enterprise. And from that work came a number of the regeneration projects and other pieces of work, such as the Bath Quays development that we've worked on the intervening 8 years. If we fast forward to 2023, we're again in a recovery space, but the context now of post-COVID recovery is recovery to a different kind of crisis, a different kind of challenges, which has brought new lessons and new considerations. So in that context, very important for the work we're doing at the moment are the themes of sustainability, as Councillor Roper said, so responding to the climate and ecological emergencies and the declarations made by this Council in 2019. So those are a top priority for us, and sustainability runs through, but also responding to the more recent issues arising from COVID around cost of living crisis and concerns around inequality. So fairness is really important as the driving principles. Some of the economic challenges we face remain the same, but our response informed by those priorities that have come up in the meantime may differ. So I think sometimes we can talk about a lot of different strategies and plans, and it can be reasonably confusing to know how they all fit together. And the economic strategies are one of a suite of documents that the Council is developing at the moment and over the coming year. And I just wanted to set those out in context. So the corporate strategy, which we're updating this year, is all around, it sets the overarching approach for the Council as an organisation to deliver our central goal of improving people's lives. Underneath that, we have three important strategies. So the economic strategy, which I'll talk about today, the joint health and wellbeing strategy, and the local plan. And each of those documents is important in providing the policy framework for action that the Council will take over the coming years. All four of these documents and strategies are informed by the same sustainable economic principles, and members may be familiar with the diagram on the right there, which is it's Kate Raworth's donut economics principle, so I'm not sure if you've had this extensively before. But what it's fundamentally about, sustainable economics, is around living within environmental limits. So the outer ring of the donut represents the ecological ceiling, the environment we have to live within. So that's things like biodiversity, carbon emissions and climate change, air quality, things that we shouldn't breach if we want to continue living sustainably into the future on this planet. The inner ring represents the social foundation, so the importance of meeting people's needs, day-to-day needs. So it's around people and the environment, and that overarching framework informs, as I said, all four of those documents. So hopefully that's a helpful context. In terms of how we are developing the economic strategy, the flowchart on the screen sets out the process for the first phase of work. So last year we began by bringing together an evidence base of economic and wider data to inform our thinking, and we've spent time analysing that with the help of colleagues across the council and with some consultants to look at what our strengths and weaknesses are as an area, which I'll come on to in a moment. We've then spent time engaging with the senior managers, with officers across the council, through local plan workshops with the community over sort of January, February, and with businesses through a dedicated stakeholder workshop to gather thoughts on that evidence base and what the priorities are for action for people. At the moment, what we're doing is consolidating that work, so bringing it together and starting to think about what are the priorities and areas for action. And the strategy with a view to producing something which should be ready by May for an incoming administration to take a view on. So that's the process that we have at the moment for developing things. What we want to ensure is that the strategy is something short and concise, so it's not a massive shopping list of actions. It's focusing on practical actions that are within our control and our budget to take forward now, so it's not just sitting on a shelf, as Councillor Roper said. It's about things that we can do. We also want it to help us build and deepen relationships with stakeholders and anchor institutions, so it's something that we can collaborate on locally and to challenge existing ways of thinking and doing things, so it's not just a business as usual document. But it will be a first step rather than War and Peace or the ultimate answer. So if I talk a little bit about some of the key insights that have come from the evidence-based work over recent months. Firstly, this slide looks at what our local economy looks like. So locally in Bath and North East Somerset we have a pretty mature economy. It's broadly based and pretty diversified. So we're not a local authority that relies on one major industry or employer for our economic success. We have a really substantial business base of over 8,500 individual businesses. They're across diverse sectors. We have a strong voluntary and community and social sector. And our business base, those numbers of businesses there, are predominantly micro businesses, so nearly 90% of those are micro businesses. We do have that ecology anchored by some larger companies which people here will recognise, whether it's Wessex Water or Bureau Harold, the larger employers. We have a number of very thriving sectors indicated on the right there, and just to pick out a couple of those, Bath, together with Bristol, is one of the top 3 locations in the country for creative and cultural sector. We know that our heritage and tourism is a defining characteristic of Bath. The picture across the district is not uniform. We have different economic makeup in our rural areas where agri-tech and farming are more important, and we have a smaller but important manufacturing sector, including in the areas around Midsummer North and Radstock and Port and Somer Valley. So we've got a broad base, but the largest employers by numbers of staff, the largest sectors are in education and health, so the public sector is also very important, and both of those have seen increase in jobs in the past 5 years. So overall, the story of the economy in Bath and North East Somerset is a very positive one. We've got some really strong economic fundamentals locally, and that includes very high employment rates. So we've got high employment above the national average and very low levels of economic inactivity. So interestingly, that poses some questions and challenges for growth. We don't have a large reserve labour pool we can draw on to expand our businesses. So we have to think about how we get more from what we've got, or whether we are drawing more people in to work here, and with the consequent implications of that for our transport system. Our resident population and our resident workforce is highly qualified, so nearly half of local residents are educated at degree level or above, which is significantly above the national picture. So we've got a great asset in terms of our people. We also have very strong assets in terms of our local institutions, so world-class educational institutions and health sector partners, and which is punching above our weight for a district of this size. It's a very strong base. It's also an incredibly attractive location for businesses and workforce because of our natural assets. And I know there was an article in the Independent online today which is reporting a study that's found Bath to be number one in the UK as the most sustainable city to work in. So it's a real kind of recognition of some of those assets. But having said all of that, there are some indicators which aren't as favourable, and it's important to, I suppose, reflect on... Oh, sorry, I'll pop to in a second. I was just going to say, we are also thinking about our position post-COVID. So the data that I've been drawing on in presenting so far tends to lead up to 2020, because the more recent national data is not especially reliable given the COVID impact. But if we're thinking about how we're recovering as a local area from those COVID impacts, the anecdotal and local evidence is pretty good. So, as with all areas, we face challenges, but as reported to Cabinet last week, our heritage services income is bouncing back, so we're expecting heritage services to return to pre-pandemic levels of activity and certainly income over the next year. And that's important because that strong economic performance directly impacts on our ability to deliver services as a council as well as on wider local jobs. We know that our city centre footfall is strong, helped by initiatives such as the return of the Christmas market. We aren't experiencing the same level of vacancies that are affecting other high streets. We have a strong interest in our commercial lets. And the infographic that's included here is from a study published by Business Finance last month, which again identifies Bath as the number one place in the UK for micro businesses, and that's based not only on the numbers of micro businesses for the area per population, but also 5-year business survival rates. So that's a really strong outcome. We also know that some things have changed post-COVID, so there are trends in home working which seem to have become embedded, which means that we've got a reduced demand for things like office accommodation, and in terms of business accommodation we're looking at different types of facilities that are needed in the future. So I was going to say, although the indicators that I've been talking about, the overall picture is really strong, there are some indicators which give us pause for thought, and those include the fact that we have reasonably low levels of economic growth and productivity growth. That's a common feature across the UK, and you've probably heard about it quite a bit in the news if you listen to the Today programme in recent weeks as we head up to the budget. But in Bath and North East Somerset, it's, we're tracking slightly lower than national rates. Earnings, both resident earnings and workplace earnings in Baines are below national average, and we have higher than average levels of part-time working. So whilst we don't have economic inactivity, we maybe have some underemployment within our resident base. And we also can expect demographic change over coming years. We are projecting to lose people in sort of middle age and increase our numbers of people in the upper age ranges. So our population is ageing with fewer workers to support an increasing elderly population. So what's emerging from these factors and from the wider evidence base is a sort of a story of a two-tier economy with some great successes but also issues around inequality that we want to address. So while some parts of Baines are reasonably or very affluent, inequality is widening, and we now have two areas in Twerton West and Whiteway which are in the top 10% most deprived nationally. And we know that cost of living challenges are particularly acute for some residents. Educational outcomes overall are very strong, but not for cohorts of children who are on free school meals or experiencing special educational needs. Life expectancy across the district is above average, above the national average, but there is a gap between the most affluent and the most deprived areas. So, for example, for women, there's a 10-year gap in life expectancy in Twerton compared to Bath Avon. And work doesn't necessarily pay for everyone, so we know that of people claiming universal credit in the district, 44% of those are actually in work, so they're not able to earn enough through that work to live well here. And housing remains unaffordable for many people due to the high prices we have here, but also the below average income levels. So those are just some of the challenges that we need to address. And so from that evidence base, just to summarise, we've identified 5 key areas of challenge that we want this economic strategy to address, and those are around inequality, particularly in educational outcomes, around affordable housing, the ageing population, our skills base, which is quite polarised in terms of the skills that people have, and also the jobs that they have from the very high-end, high-skilled jobs, and the foundational economy, the lower end of skills, and less in the middle. So we need to address that. And also the fact that pressure and lack of land means we have lack of space for employment growth. And all the while ensuring that we address issues of sustainability. So having looked at the evidence and identified the challenges, we've started to talk to people about what our priorities should be, what should we do about this, and we've identified this kind of draft framework which we'll be working up over coming months. I think as a bottom line we want Baines to be fairer, more prosperous and more sustainable, and in order to achieve that we've identified 5 priority areas for action around greener economy, good work, resilient businesses, inclusive innovation and housing affordability. Greener economy means growing green sectors, whether that's retrofit or renewable energies or sectors or others, but also making sure that the wider economy builds its sustainability and improves its performance, whether that's reducing business emissions or thinking about how we help sectors such as tourism to be more sustainable. There's a priority around good work, which ties in very much with the work on the health and wellbeing strategy and the integrated care board, around making sure that residents can thrive in good work. They have the pay, the hours and the skills and development they need. Resilient businesses is around business support, training for SMEs, access to employment space and how we use local supply chains and develop those. Inclusive innovation is making sure that as we develop the businesses of the future, there's an opportunity in there for everyone, whether that means thinking about how we collaborate with universities on spin-off businesses and helping people to take opportunities from work that comes from our centres of research innovation, or whether that's supporting STEM education and career development so people can, local children and young people are able to benefit from opportunities in tech and new sectors. And housing, I think, speaks for itself in terms of housing affordability, access to good, quality affordable housing. Just finally, 2 points to note are that within the economic strategy, we want to make sure that we're addressing the different needs of different parts of Bath and North East Somerset, so it's not a homogenous economy, and we know that we need to speak not only to Bath City, but to specific needs of the rural economies and places like the Somer Valley. And finally, we want to work in particular with anchor institutions, thinking about how we as an organisation, as a council, and they as significant employers and procurers of goods and services can use that power to make a difference to the local economy. So that's the draft framework, and I'll just end by giving a sense of the indicative forward timetable. Obviously this remains to be agreed with an incoming administration in May, but we'll be working over the next couple of months to develop actions in relation to the priorities I've set out today, with a view to engaging members in May and June ahead of wider consultation and engagement on a draft strategy over the summer. Subject to agreement with the incoming chair of the panel, think about how we'd like to bring that to scrutiny, and by the end of the year having a document to sign off. So that's my update. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to throw it open to the panel now. Do you have any questions? Councillor Singleton and Councillor Furze.
Thanks very much. Very interesting presentation. A couple of questions, if I may. Quite a lot of work talk about micro businesses. What is a micro business, and how do we measure the fact that we're sort of number one in micro businesses?
My second question, I have a sort of Pavlovian reaction when I see sustainable aviation. And I wonder if you could have any further insight into why we're a leader there and what exactly we're doing. Thanks.
So micro businesses, SME and large are all definitions of size and number of employees. So in terms of the work from business financed, they were looking at self-employed sectors and I think it was businesses employing under 4 people. So there are different categories that represent micro, small, medium and large organisations. I can provide details if you follow, test me on my knowledge. In terms of sustainable aviation, I think it's a recognition of sectors that are already present so that we know that locally and within the sort of wider region we have a lot of aviation business and there is a lot of conversations about how aviation can be made sustainable. I think it's a question for future consideration as to whether we want to encourage more of that and whether that's something you want to go into or whether or what the preferences is for business sectors to target for any future growth. So I don't think it's taken as a given that we want to develop sustainable aviation sectors. It's just a recognition that there are the businesses in that sector present locally.
Councillor Furze.
Thank you. Thank you. It's Jackie, isn't it? It is Jackie, yeah. Three subject areas, really, I just wanted to explore. One was you talk about the rise in job numbers in education and health, which I think are 2 of the anchor institutions you talked about in your slides. There are others, obviously anchor institutions, but it's the rises in job numbers where probably the question is how does that equate to the value of those jobs? Because if we're talking about low value jobs, then a lot of those individuals have to travel into Bath because you quite rightly talk about housing costs and the gap between the available number of social housing and those on the list. Yeah, so we've got greater demand and lower cost jobs, lower value jobs, which they're jobs. Don't get me wrong, but we then have to. The consequence of that is that they have to get into the city, and there's been debates about buses, there's parking costs, there's the cost of actually owning a car, using the parking lot. All of these things become a factor around those increases in jobs. So don't get me wrong, increasing the number of jobs is not a bad thing, but how do you do it in a way that actually accommodates those people who want those jobs, okay? That's because it would just draw more people into the city, and I think you did point on that in one of your slides, yeah. The second area, if I may, Chair, deprivation. You talk specifically about Twerton West and Whiteway. Now, the reason you talk about those is they flag up in a national indices because they are predominantly a ward each. Twerton is a ward, which flags up in the deprivation index, and so does Southdown. But, and I've got 2 Lansdowne councillors here, and there's no Coombe councillors, but we all know that in our wards there are pockets of deprivation which are far worse than Twerton and Southdown, but they do not flag up because in Lower Lansdowne they're competing with the values and the cost of housing in the upper parts of Lansdowne, and in Kingsmead you've got the Circus and the Royal Crescent in the same ward as some of the least well-off people in the southwest of England, and they don't flag up at all. So when we talk about these deprivations, just beware that we are actually talking about, I think we should be looking at a smaller enclave in the rural areas, exactly the same, smaller pockets of deprivation, and target them, because just targeting Twerton and Whiteway, who get a lot of national money as well because of they're on a ward level, is sort of a bit one-sided, I think, yeah? And a final point, Chair, if I may, ageing population, but you don't talk in your slides about how economically active that ageing population is. There's a big debate about all the people that have been able to afford to retire early. It's a case of, yes, ageing population is one thing, but it's the economic activity, I guess, which is the real question. And if I may, just final point, Chair, sustainable aviation, all right, just answering the point here. The company I work for, we've developed air traffic control systems for the UK, and there is a substantial saving in the software development, and my colleagues do, not me, I'm not a software engineer, but my colleagues do, about reducing, making decisions, aircraft decisions, a long way out, because a human can only make a decision within basically a screen's worth of flights coming in and how they manage them and stack them, whereas the computer system that we've been developing, or have been developed and have developed in the UK and across the world, thinks about the whole airspace and managing aircraft coming in and out. I digress there, Chair, but I just thought... So that's in mind. So when Alistair talks about sustainable aviation, I'm thinking, how do you reduce the impact of the aviation you've got?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Furse. Councillor McPhee.
Well, I was interested to know what good work is in a little more detail. There must be some definitions there. And I'd still like to come back to the micro business. I mean, I struggle with the idea that Bath and North East Somerset are number one in terms of total. So I presume it's per head, is it? I'd be interested to see, I mean, that's an impressive claim. I'd be interested to see some documentary evidence on that. And thinking about it, I wonder how much accommodation these micro businesses need, because one thing I think I'm clear on in Keynsham and in Bath is that we're struggling really for commercial space, and that would need to be clearly in part of the plan if we're going to make, this claim, which is a good claim.
Sorry, can I just dip in there? Because I've seen some reports that the micro-business numbers that you've got up there are across the whole region, but the number per head is just in Bath. So I don't know if you're able to address that.
So not in North East Somerset?
No, exactly. So the head count numbers are Bath, but the micro-business is across Bath and North East Somerset.
Are you, sorry, just for clarification, are you referring to the business financed numbers?
The micro-business Bath number one, yeah.
So I think that on business finance specifically, when they first put out the numbers, there was a confusion in what they put out. They recalculated it because they'd conflated Bath only and Bath with North East Somerset, but they have confirmed that even recalculating it to get the stacking up right, Bath and North East Somerset together still come out top.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Would you like me to go back to the first questions? So in terms of the value of jobs and the increase in jobs in health and education sectors and different sectors, I think that one of the things that we're going to have to deal with is that as an organisation and more broadly across the district, we need to be able to attract workers to do jobs that need doing, whether that's in the care sector or whether that's bin collection operatives. There are jobs that we need doing, otherwise things will grind to a halt. It's important that those people are able, that people to do those jobs are able to do them, either by getting here or by living here. And so there's a combination of sort of balancing affordable housing so that people can afford to live and work without putting additional strain on the transport movements, but also making sure that we've got the transport to bring people in as they're needed. So it's a complicated picture. Those jobs, it's not just do we want to grow those sectors, we need people to work in those sectors, and we need to make sure that we can attract people to do those jobs and that they're able to make a good living doing those jobs, which means which means addressing some of the affordable housing questions. And maybe to pick that up with the question about what is a good job and what is good work in any job, in any sector, making sure that people have, that it pays enough to live well, that people are able to access training and development to upskill within their job to do the job to the best of their ability, and able to access opportunities to progress careers, whether that's working from a foundation up in a healthcare setting or working in a tech spin-off from the university. So it doesn't matter what the setting of the job is, thinking about what constitutes good work, because we know that good work is a really important determinant of wider health and other outcomes. So that's where we're working together with our colleagues in the public health side, thinking about how the economic strategy links in with our health and wellbeing strategy to achieve those wider outcomes. I hope that addresses. Sorry.
Councillor Roper.
You're absolutely right about the lack of space. It's a huge problem, particularly in Bath and Keynsham, but it's also a problem down in Midsummer Norton and Radstock. There is very little space indeed. If you want a business start-up, if you go on a search engine now and look for commercial space in the entire area, hardly anything comes up for rent, even less for sale. It is a huge problem, and a lot of what we've got is past its sell-by date, frankly. A lot of it's very old, doesn't meet modern standards, and they're not particularly attractive units to set up a new business in. So there is a huge problem there, and we've got some difficult questions to resolve on how we go about fixing that. We are constrained by our geography, we're constrained by the Green Belt in Bath, and we're constrained by planning issues in Keynsham as well. So that is a huge issue. That's why it's so important that we have this policy, so we can feed it into the next local plan. But these are not. There are a whole series of things relating to this that are not going to have quick solutions. Housing, transport, employment space are all going to be medium-term problems to solve.
But excuse me, Chair, but they do need to go clearly on to the next administration as a priority, and I trust you to do that. Sorry.
I was just going to answer as well on the question around ageing population and whether that is around early retirees and what the opportunities are. I think where we're expecting to see the largest growth is in the more elderly age brackets, so particularly above 70s and 90s. And so I think what is important is we think about the kind of the ongoing care needs of that ageing population and what that means for employment needs, as well as thinking about the younger, older populations, if you like, and how we make the most of the sort of skills and talents and the opportunities through either bringing people back into the workplace or volunteering opportunities where people don't want to work formally or don't need to. But I think there's a couple of different issues in there.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So I'm from Midsummer Norton, and I think I'm just trying to reflect some of the concerns that our residents have, particularly when they hear about economic strategies. And I think the main one is a concern that you're trying to create one strategy for two vastly different areas. And Bath and North East Somerset are, in some areas, polar opposites. And the concern is generally whether these economic strategies focus too much on the needs of Bath and not enough on the needs of places like the Somer Valley. Just a couple of examples. I mean, for example, with housing, Bath, Midsummer Norton and places like Keynsham always seem to meet their this requirement for 30% affordable and social housing when we construct houses. It's never met in Bath. In fact, most of the ones that have been built in Bath are zero. And this has an effect on a lot of aspects of what you're looking at. Certainly things like commuting. The levels of commuting are only set to increase because of that. We're moving people on poorer incomes out of Bath to places like Midsummer Norton and Keynsham, and then people that are care workers or work in hospitality or retail, all having then to commute back into Bath to work. So it's just really having some confidence that whether one strategy suits all in this purpose, and the public perception of the difference between the way they perceive things are happening in Bath to places in the rural community. It doesn't necessarily reflect the reality, but for example, we're building extra security in the city centre at 7.4 million, which is perfectly understandable and probably required. But at the same time, we can't even get street marshals in our streets in Midsummer Norton, and it's just that perception by the public that there's this difference between Bath and North East Somerset.
Just to sort of briefly respond, I think I touched on it at the end, but I think it's very important that we don't have a one-size-fits-all economic strategy, and we are looking through a place lens at what we're doing. So I was at the local plan workshop, which was canvassing views in Radstock, canvassing views for the local plan and the economic strategy together, and thinking about what the needs are of those places specifically. So not what does Midsummer Norton need to do for Bath, but what does Midsummer Norton and Radstock Norton need for their own economic vitality, but certainly thinking about those issues about mobility between the implications that you're raising. So I think we want to make sure that the strategy addresses the different needs of different places. This is something we need to follow up on.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Can I just add something to that, if I may?
Oh,
sure.
Sorry.
We had a very interesting session a few weeks ago when we got a load of businesses in and had a long session about what they regarded as their big issues. We had several from Midsummer Norton and Radstock, and they absolutely emphasised that they didn't feel that they were part of the game. They felt that they were very much left to their own devices down there. And we really picked up on that. And I think what they also said, and also some of the businesses in Bath said, that there's been a real collapse in the business networking and business community. Was probably happening slightly before COVID, and I think COVID completely accelerated that process. And what's become clear to me, and I think clear to the officers, is that we really need to network far better with businesses across the district to understand what their specific requirements are. And if I leave this role in a few weeks' time having achieved nothing, I think that more than that would be good, because as a council we've been, in my opinion, very poor at, no criticism intended of any officers present, at talking and communicating with businesses and getting what it is they need. And so if we can improve that, that would be a big win.
Councillor Duguid.
I think you find, Jackie, that ONS have classification of micros up to 9 employees. For me, looking at this draft strategic framework, it's housing affordability that is such a stark thing. And I think Councillor Hughes has mentioned, and Councillor First, this need to commute in. And I wish you well on that. The affordability, I think you mentioned, is 12 times. That's presumably across Baines, not just Bath. Because in Bath, the average salary is, last time I looked at the ONS data, was over 28 grand, 28 and a half, something like that. And I think that's way over 12 in Bath. So that really is going to be a struggle. And the other very interesting stat you came up with there is that 44% of 12,000 in Baines are claiming universal credit. So that, to me, looks an insuperable conundrum in terms of that housing affordability, unless you're looking at North East Somerset as the place where the housing affordability is going to be. Question?
I think it is a challenge, and it's one which in part will need to be picked up through the local plan process in terms of where development goes, because there are potentially difficult decisions to make around where you site development to suit which purposes and where you can get it out of viability. So I think it is a really important and difficult challenge. I think that the administration has worked on building some new affordable council housing. That's a kind of question for the incoming administration as to the position that they want to take and where that would want to go. So I don't want to prejudice that, but it is a challenge that we're definitely looking at, wrestling with and thinking about what the options are.
I just had a comment to make, really, with regard to, and following on from Councillor Hughes' point about Midsummer Norton being very different to Bath. But I serve quite a rural community, and in my last corporate scrutiny panel, I'm going to name check Midnet Thrubwell. It's always a good one, because that's out on the further reaches west of our authority, and it is actually quite rural, despite the fact that it is very close to the A38. So we do have a lot of agriculture, but again, in pockets, it's a very expensive area to live. So that's one of the conundrums, again, to add to the complexity. But also we do have modern companies that in the past have wanted to move into rural areas, just off the A37 as an example, or the A38, and they haven't been able to do that because of rural broadband. So my understanding was that just off the A368, not that far from the A37, there was a robotics company that wanted to go, basically, as probably a number of people would describe it, in the middle of nowhere. But it was convenient for them, and they couldn't go there because that was they just couldn't get the broadband out there, so they couldn't work. So these are, again, complexities that would be great to look into the mix and just establish, because I think there'll be different criteria for different areas. Thank you very much. Anything else to add? No more questions? Thank you very much for your presentation, Jackie. Just for those that have joined us a bit later, at the beginning of the meeting, I've actually moved the agenda item slightly, so I've moved item 10 to item 11. So the aqueous update will be the last item on the agenda, and we don't have a panel work plan because of the forthcoming elections. So just to update you with that. So if we move on to item number 9, and invest in Bath and North East Somerset. That's Councillor Roper, are you introducing this as well? Okay, lovely. So Simon, will you be introducing this, or are you handing over? You'll, great, lovely. Right, so welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
So this is really an update from the last scrutiny. I think when we came to the last scrutiny, we were undertaking some work, particularly on economic development, around how businesses interact with the council, and we shared the Invest website with Scrutiny around the business interface that businesses can experience. We've done quite a lot of work on that now, so this was really bringing back and presenting an update of how our business engagement through our economic development activity has developed. Some of the achievements and successes we've achieved through the delivery of services through what is actually a very small team within the council. Together with, we were then going to give you a fly-through of the updated business interface through the Invest and Achieve branding that the business community engage with the council through. So Rob was going to present just a quick overview of the service activity since last scrutiny meeting, and then demonstrate a business journey in terms of a business engagement with the council's team around the services we offer and how we support businesses in the district.
Oh, and to cast it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi there. Is it possible to have yours back again, because you've got the presentation on there? It doesn't seem to be connecting up with the PowerPoint.
Apologies. For some reason.
Yeah. You didn't be able to get the link into the website.
Yeah.
Just treating it as a separate screen. You want to just drag it over. Don't know which side it thinks it is. There you go.
You do when you know how.
So that's okay. Not doing the PowerPoint. Same thing. Okay. You split screen, drag it.
Windows P.
Drag it. There we go. Okay. And if I just go to exit, slideshow. Thanks for that. So, yeah. So I'm Rob Dawson. For those that don't know me, I sit in the Council's Business and Skills team. I was just going to provide an update from a previous overview and scrutiny panel, an item which was around support for businesses in North East Somerset and also the Invest in Baines website. Previously was in Invest in Bath. So just before I do that, I'll do a quick flow through of our team. I appreciate some of the panel members have already had this presentation. But our team delivers on three primary services. One is Invest, which is predominantly business-facing. The Achieve brand is more for residents and will look at employment and skills programme. And Future Bright is a specific programme looking at in-work progression. So again, that's on skills development. A summary of the key areas that Invest in Baines, I'll focus on that, is around property. Clearly that came up in the previous item, so it's assisting businesses with their commercial property searches, business support provision as well. As another big element of the Invest in Baines service is to provide good news stories about the local economy and business networks. So our team has 13 staff members, and this is just an overview of some of the programmes we delivered in 2022. So particular interest for this item is the business support programme, where we had around about 500 direct interactions with our circa 8,000 businesses in Bath and North East Somerset. And just under 750 businesses have received at least 3 hours of dedicated support through our Universal Business Support Programme. That programme's seen just over 80 businesses start up as well. Another key programme is Future Bright, which we talked about previously. In terms of our team's big developments for the next year, a core part of our delivery is the Universal Business Support Programme. It draws in external funding to provide expert business support for not only existing businesses but also pre-starts. And we've secured additional funding to continue and expand on that programme over the next 3 years. An offshoot of that programme, which has been of particular interest in 2022, was called Recover, Evolve, Grow. And that's where we supported 25 North East Somerset businesses with a network of individual business experts. So we advertised a programme, got interest, and then depending on what that individual business's needs would be, could be bring a new product to market, pivoting from bricks and mortar retail to online. These are examples of the kind of needs they had. We matched them with a business expert to provide at least 6 hours of dedicated support. So we had 25 North East Somerset businesses through that programme, and we're looking to expand on that with the new Universal Business Support when that comes online later this year. So what I want to talk about is, if I just move on. So our Invest in Bath website, which has now been rebranded to Invest in Baines last year, these are some of the kind of hits we're actually getting on the site. So in the past 12 months, we've had just under 13,000 unique users, just under 15,000 hits myself. And In terms of our audience base, predominantly they're in the west of England, but we do have international visitors to the website too. Most of them are new visitors, so something we're looking to build upon is trying to get return visitors, finding out about new programs and repeating to go to the website. And also the bounce rate is quite high for a website. That's how the percentage of users that leave after one visit. So what we're trying to do is reduce that so our users are finding out more information about the programs and support. Our current website looks like that. It is quite dated in style. There was too much text on a lot of pages. There's near 150 individual pages on the website. What our aims for our new website was to simplify it, so reduction in pages and text, really bring out the different areas within Bath and North East Somerset, have more focuses, case studies, news stories that are relevant for different parts of our districts. We want to update the maps, images and videos, and we also want to tailor the main inquiries we get. So business support and property form the majority of the inquiries our team receive from businesses, so we want to really improve those sections of the website. What I'll do now is give you a quick fly-through of the website, which is currently in testing mode. It's not live. This is currently the homepage of our new website. So predominantly, the main sections will be around finding a business premises, getting business support. Tuesdays is really about celebrating the successes of the area, and will be targeting inward investors that want to move. We will also have a contact us section and news, networking and events as well. Going back to the previous item as well, we really want to build on that. It's on the other screen, isn't it? That's the tricky thing. So, an example of, it's because it's on split screen. Yeah.
Raise that completely.
I can't get to it. Okay. It's not there, is it? Just this one. Okay. How can I maximize that there? Okay, got it. So, just to take you through the site, the homepage will have details of support for your business. There'll be a newsletter sign-up option. We're going to have a focus on the new business networks. We're certainly working with partners like TechSpark to bring out new business networking opportunities. We've also had some recent success with some tailored and business networking events down in Midsummer Norton. We're trying to boost our transparency, so we'll have a section of key performance indicators for the team on our website. So quarterly, we'll be able to track and evidence where our support has been. There'll be a dedicated news and events section too on the latest programs, and contact us at the bottom. So in terms of finding a business premises for managed workspace and serviced offices, businesses will be able to look through all the various options available, filter by location, and for any individual unit, you can actually find out more information by clicking through. For business support, it's not live as yet. For Tuesdays, so there will be an interactive map where people can hover over the location that's of interest to them, either Somer Valley, Keynsham, and the rural veins or the city of Bath, and get dedicated information for that area. We're building a new log of business success stories. These are either local companies that have been through one of our support programs, they've got a particular sector specialism, or that they've achieved remarkable turnover or employment growth in the past 3 years. So again, you'll be able to filter by location. Here are some examples of companies we've been working with and have put through recent programs. Again, for each of these case studies, you can click on and get more information about that. For example, Pucker Herbs, who moved to the chocolate factory back in 2018. In this section, we'll also have locational information, so for example, lifestyle, successful sectors, connectivity, and we'll also have a section on digital, which is a key element. And I'll just bring it back to the home page because there are some dedicated business support pages here. So again, we're simplifying things, so council-led or funded business support programs will have in one section. So this all includes the key programs, as well as some of the other council teams that would be of interest. For example, business rates and procurement. Partner services, so that's the likes of TechSpark, Business West, West of England Combined Authority, where they're running programs, we will also list them there. As well as some targeted sectors, we'll have a section on networking and events. There's low carbon and sustainability programs, for example, carbon surveys, green business grants, which is going to launch a new program in the summer. So that's an overview of where we are with the site. We're working with the web team to hopefully finalise this and launch by mid-April to the public. Thank you, and thank you for bearing with me with the technical difficulties. Does anyone like to ask any questions?
Anybody got any questions? Councillor McPhee.
Not a question, but I was highly critical of this when it was invested in Bath, and I have to say I'm very impressed with what I've just seen, and I will be looking through that website as soon as it comes up.
Thank you, and we would really appreciate feedback. I'm sure we can actually we can share the trial site in its current form as well for councillors' input.
Well, I'd certainly be very interested in that, as I represent a rural area, and I think that would be great if there were places in the rural areas that were on there, especially things like office space and where we can get office space if we want it as well. That would be very useful. Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I'm hoping you can see the irony in your presentation talking about how people can find serviced office space when you're just about to shut down the only serviced office space that you provide and the only commitment you make in the Somer Valley to supporting business. So I'm hoping that you can understand that. We have a real shortage of space in our area for business, to support businesses, which is borne out by the fact that the businesses that are being evicted from the building you're closing are struggling to find anywhere else to relocate their businesses to. And perhaps this accounts for one of the problems with the poor attendance to your website, is maybe that we can't actually accommodate businesses. A lot of businesses in Midsummer Norton, as they evolve, have to move out. They move out of Baines, they move to Frome, they move to Bristol, they move to Shepton Mallet, where they can find office space or business space or industrial space. So I think I think there's a bigger issue here than just the website. I think it's what we're actually providing.
Thank you, Councillor. So certainly with our website and comms, we are trying to make it more accessible and available for the different locations. On that existing points, and clearly that's being taken up in the paper and can make representations on that. I can't speak for that particular points you've made, but in terms of serviced office accommodation and other business stock, we are tracking that. Clearly there will be a new industrial and office market review undertaken this year, which will underpin a lot of the local plan. So that will be looking at demand for and supply of both office and industrial across the patch in Bath and North East Somerset. So we are tracking this. Obviously, there is a massive shortage of industrial space in Bath and North East Somerset, and we are responding to that. Clearly, there are plans afoot for Somer Valley Enterprise Zone, and we're supporting, the expansion of the Old Mills Industrial Estate too in that particular area. So where there are opportunities, we will support businesses to find space.
Sorry, yes, you mentioned the Somer Valley Enterprise Zone. That's 5 to 10 years away. So is the expansion of Old Mills. So we're looking at where we are in the interim between for now and the next 5 years. How are we going to respond to the business needs? When our response seems to be let's just shut things down.
I think, sure, with the limited resources the council has and the limited budget, the best impact we can make for businesses across our district is through the services we can offer to signpost and to help them to support their business needs. Now, the property aspect in particular is a particular challenge at a district level. It's manifested in Somer Valley as a particularly acute need. But I think that the lack of business space that Baines can offer is a matter to address through strategy in the local plan to grow our business space capabilities and space for businesses. At this stage, with our very limited budget for the service area, the best impact we get is to be able to orchestrate events and help businesses to support them through the activity of the economic development team, through the services we offer with the business events and the other services to signpost and help them with the grant work and the support they need. So that gets us the biggest and broadest support package available to businesses. Rather than targeting on a small limited number of businesses, we can get the biggest impact through the greatest reach with using our budget accordingly to support these type of initiatives.
Councillor Hodge and then Councillor Furs.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I just wanted to, the original website, which I wasn't very familiar with, and I just wondered whether, my heart always sinks actually when a website is updated because I like the details set out in a traditional way, big chunks of writing. So did you, is everything that was there in the past previously in all that information, have you kind of cross-referenced to check it's all there? And also the contact, that's always the thing that you really want as a contact. Is that at the bottom? There was, I think, the address of the Keynsham Centre and a phone number. I hope there's not going to be a live chat, but can't bear them either. But what is the contact? How it links you into is it more than just a switchboard, or can you get to the people you need to speak to?
Yes, of course. So in terms of the information, we are cutting down some of the text just because from our experience and research, people aren't staying on pages where there's huge bodies of text. So what we're trying to do is make it more concise and have link-throughs to, say, the exact serviced office provider's site or a developer's site so that they can investigate in more detail. We're trying not to duplicate what's on the main Baines Council website as well. So, for example, business rates, we'll touch on it and then link through to all the reliefs and exemptions which are listed in detail on the Baines site. So we're trying not to leave anything out, but what we are doing is we've got assurances from our web team that they will keep the old website live in the background for a year. So if we suddenly need to row back and if we're getting inquiries from something which we haven't included in the site, we can add it on. The contact us section will be at the top as well. The menu will be much more expanded and people will be able to call through to book appointments. We've got a very active business engagement officer who will jump on any inquiry we get. For example, we're working with our food safety team and our business rates team. So any new business registrations, we get copied into that and we'll just do an introductory email. You'll be able to track our interactions over time. So after the second quarter, we'll also show whether we're up or down on the previous quarter.
Councillor Furse.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. An observation, really, Chair. And what Councillor Hughes has said is absolutely valid and quite right to raise, but because I think we were talking about a particular service property in Midsummer Norton, and should Councillor Hughes make some sort of declaration of interest of some sort? I don't know.
I think it was a general point, really.
No, it was about a specific property.
Yes, I know.
There was a general point as well.
There was a general point, but it was a specific property, which is obviously in Councillor Hughes' ward.
So I'm happy to make a declaration. I'm a tenant in the building where my business is. I also have a business in the High Street, so I'll declare an interest in Midsummer Norton High Street. I also live on North Road, so anything to do with North Road, I'll declare an interest there as well. So it's a ridiculous thing to say.
Thank you. So, well, I guess that is a declaration of interest, Councillor Hughes, but okay, thank you. Any more questions for the officers? No? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So I'd like to move on to item 11, which is going to become item 10, which is the Cabinet Member update. And who, Councillor Davies, are you going to, or Councillor Samuel, will you give the, you don't have a, no? Everybody's pointing at everybody else. Okay. So no separate update then, Councillor Samuel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. That was good. So if we could now move on to the Aquarius update, please. We've read the papers that you've sent out with your business plan. We're not going to keep pointing at each other, are you?
Sorry, some of the papers that were shared, I think, were going to be held in. If they're discussed, they need to be held in a closed session. Is that right? Have I misunderstood that?
Well, actually, I think what we're going to do is we're going to start the session off now.
Okay.
We are going to, obviously the councillors are going to ask questions. If there is anything that you feel that you can't answer in the public forum, then we will take guidance from the officers to move into private session.
And can I just confirm, is that anything... Are the papers that need to be discussed in a private session the three additional ones that came later?
I believe that some of those papers are probably in the public domain. A lot of it is in the public domain already. We've seen the accounts, we've seen the business plan, we voted on those. We voted on the change in the structure of the organisation holding company in May last year. Oh, gosh, that went quick. Yeah, it was last year. It seems like yesterday, but obviously, clearly it wasn't. So, I mean, if there is anything that you feel is sensitive, then we will look to take advice from the officers and then move into private session if that's required. Is that all right? Is that a plan? Has everybody agreed on that? Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've circulated an update paper, and appended to the paper was a short highlight report on company performance. This is a mid-term review of the company's 2-year business plan, which ran from 2022 to 2024 and was approved by Council last February as part of the Council decisions in February around accepting the business plan of Aquarius and moving it forward. So the update is very much between Tim and myself in terms of just the company performance. If you'd like me to present that on screen and just work through the document we've circulated, I can do that, or we can go straight into questions.
We've had the report, and I'm assuming that everybody's read it. So I'm of a mind to go straight into questions, if that's all right with you.
That's fine. I'll get, while you go into questions, I can put it on the screen so we can refer back to it if anyone has a particular question about a particular performance objective of the company.
Yeah, that's great. So we have an extra. Well, not a panel member, but from the audit committee. So what I'll do is I'll go through the corporate scrutiny panel, and then if there's any other questions that Councillor Blackburn wants to ask, then then we'll ask at the end. Does any of the panel have any questions for Tim or Simon? Oh, you're very silent. Right, Councillor Dogood.
Yes, my first question, I'll do the starter for 10, is the payments back to the council. We discussed this last time round. They're not profit as such, they're cash. And are some of those, can we just have clarification, some of those are loans that have been made into the company in the past, so the £1 million is not a dividend as such, it's a payment back to the council which includes presumably part of a dividend, but also includes part of a return of loans being made from the council in the past.
Yes, indeed. I'm very happy to answer that. So the objective set for the company is to return £1 million of revenue return to the council each year. That revenue return is made up of commercial interest returns, not capital repayments, they're separate. So the commercial interest rate return we pay, plus then topped up with dividend when necessary. When we first started up as a company, as you can imagine, until we're selling houses and generating income, we have no money to pay dividends. So the return is predominantly coming through interest. So when we started Riverside, the return was predominantly interest. As we mature as a company and are selling the houses out and actually generating profits, that return is coming more as dividends. So the profile changes year on year depending on the actual delivery profile of the company for that year, but it is a combination of the two, and is £1 million of real revenue cash each year made of two. Unlike many local authority housing companies, our interest isn't rolled up and paid only when we sell houses. We have to start repaying commercial interest from day one, and we have to allow for that when we're pulling together our business cases and business plans, and that's reflected accordingly in our revenue budget models.
South Gloucestershire. There's a lot more activity going on in South Gloucestershire. Are you, Tim, taking on... Are these variable costs that you're incurring as you move into South Gloucestershire and more of your activity is South Gloucestershire, or are you increasing overhead to do that? Is it covering existing overhead, or are you having to take on new overhead as you expand into the South Gloucestershire activity?
So at the moment, everything is within existing overhead, but all of those costs are covered by South Gloucestershire. So as we're developing the actual planning applications design, that's all done under a purchase order with an overhead contribution and profit contribution included. As we move into the delivery side of those sites, a business case comes to both South Gloucestershire and to Baines as shareholder, and once that's approved, it's all within the business case in the returns generated from the site in question. And that includes profits as well as overhead contributions, all factored in to those business cases. So it is all covered. At the moment, it's all within existing resources. We're resourced up to deliver the pipeline we foresee. As that pipeline grows into the future, we will need to take on additional resources, but they'll be on the delivery side. Our back office is able to cope with the pipeline we foresee. It's the delivery side that may have to gear up in terms of project management and those type of things.
Do you see, if this seems to be working with South Gloucester, I mean, other members may have their views whether it's working, whether it's a distraction or not, but it's certainly gaining ground as a part of your portfolio. Do you see any opportunities in North Somerset going forward?
So we have had some initial discussions with North Somerset Council. They're currently evaluating. They have quite a number of potential housing delivery sites they're looking at, and they're looking at options for. Once they've been able to do some internal evaluations, they're very keen to come back and engage with us around how Aqueous might support them under a very similar partnership model to South Gloucestershire. That is the sales and overage approach that we have very successfully deployed with South Gloucestershire in partnership.
My last question is, to those of us, and I have had some installation experience in the construction sector, just explain the sales and overture model to us, because some of us are not as well as acquainted with it as we should be.
So a sales and overage approach is basically a simple land transaction where South Gloucestershire sell the site, in this case to Aqueous, for an agreed land value, and that land value is derived from a residual land value model that we use for all of our site developments. So that agreed land value is paid across, and then we deliver the site. Now, the first elements in terms of the profits and the money generated from that site, obviously it has to cover all of the costs which are factored in. That includes our costs as a company in terms of delivering the development. It also has to deliver a profit. That profit level is agreed with the shareholder at a level of percentage, 15% in the case of South Gloucestershire. So that's the first thing it has to deliver. If it delivers in excess of that, then that profit that's called an overage. So if we deliver more than 15% profit after covering all of the costs, the first 15% we keep. Anything over that is then shared 50-50 between Aqueous and South Gloucestershire. And so that's the overage element. Only if you deliver overage do you share it.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Sorry, thank you very much. I just wanted to be clear. So a concept I've had difficulty with is a fixed return of £1 million per annum. The company seems to be will be delivering some big sites, Bath Western Riverside, Midland Road, and expanding its activities and keeping a number of, obviously expanding the pipeline and having products coming through. I just wondered how we came to this kind of fixed return for the council, whether that will continue to be appropriate.
So that original return was based upon some modelling when we first sort of established Aqueous Construction and Aqueous Developments, based upon the transfer pipeline purely from Baines that we had in place then under a transfer agreement. That has changed quite significantly as the company has delivered, as the company potentially will grow in the future. That is our current baseline. But going forwards, if we get into delivering some of those larger sites and at greater scale in the future, that can be revisited with the shareholder. And I know we talk regularly to Simon and to the shareholder about what that might grow to in the future. And we're also looking at some alternative delivery models that might enable even greater returns to the council in the future. So we are looking at that. The aim is around maximising that return to the council. But in order to maximise the return, we have to obviously have the sites to deliver and the sales being generated in terms of generating the income to generate the cash to pay to the council.
I think, just to add to that, I think one of the documents we shared was the pipeline tracker that Tim and I we use as the shareholder to essentially set out the pipeline of sites that the council could make available to Aqueous. And there is an expectation in setting the new business plan for the company from next year for the following 2 years that £1 million a year is reassessed against the pipeline of sites that the council is making available. So I suppose the change, and one of the significant changes, is the South Gloucestershire sites were introduced helpfully by the by the company to plug a delay in Bath and North East Somerset sites coming through the planning system and coming to Aqueous to deliver. So there has been a delay in some of the sites like Midland Road, for example, whilst the council sorts out the relocation of the household recycling centre. Aqueous can't get on and deliver the site, so their mitigation plan broadly been to engage other authorities and develop that pipeline. That has increased, essentially that's increased the council's, the company's opportunity, because their pipeline of future sites is now much larger than the original business plan, and the expectation is, and Tim has started this piece of work as a company, for their next 2-year plan, they will revisit and reprofile that number, which could increase. So it's not a static £1 million. We are expecting that is reviewed and developed as part of their future business plan for 2024 to 2026, so that 2-year period addresses the available sites that could come forward for delivery in that period.
So I have one follow-on question. Just one more question, yes. Yes, it was just a small point of discount received for the council, 100,000 on the shared ownership of properties at Sladebrook Road and 150,000 for Newbridge Hill. With the overage, I didn't quite understand what that means.
So that basically means that at the outset of those developments, we pre-agreed a price with the council based upon the value of those properties at the time.
Yeah.
As we know, the housing market, and obviously we're going back a few months now, the housing market continues to grow. And what would normally happen is you would sell the properties into the housing market at the values at that time. So we had those properties revalued, and they were valued much higher than the price we'd pre-agreed with the council. So what we were trying to reflect there is that by pre-agreeing those prices with Aqueous, the council was able to generate even more positive value for Bath and North East Somerset Council, because had we not agreed those prices, they would have been that much higher.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So I guess my question, I've been looking at the business plan we were shown a year ago, and it has the core aims of Aqueous, and they include things like to increase the housing stock for both tenants and homeowners to meet local housing needs, and to support the council in its delivery of social housing on land owned and acquired by the council. So I'm just trying to understand, because within these core aims there's nothing about developing housing for South Gloucestershire. Now, I noticed that Malmains Drive looks good, 30 homes with 11 affordable, but it just looks to me like we're solving somebody else's housing problems. Now, we heard earlier on that, that the house prices in this area have increased, and we've seen a 12.5% increase in social housing demand since 2021. So I guess my concern is, do you actually have the capacity to meet the obligations of the core aims and South Gloucester, and provide the service to South Gloucester? And what's the purpose now of Aqueous? Is it purely to be a commercial company and to increase, to provide an income, or I'm trying to figure out how it fits in with these core aims.
Yes, well, it is very much to do all of these things. As we said, what we did with the shareholder was identify the fact that in order to ensure we have a sustainable company that is delivering and has a sustainable pipeline, we need a pipeline that is regular. We can't have a pipeline that's up there one year and down here next year and up there. We need to try and smooth that pipeline. So working with South Gloucestershire enables us to smooth it. It hopefully is enable us to smooth it in an upward trajectory. We can plan for that in terms of plan for delivery. As I said, things like the resources we will need around project delivery, we're able to scale those up quite easily in a whole range of things by employing staff directly, use contractors, using agency. We can do that in a whole range of ways to access those project resources we need to deliver those sites. In terms of what we're delivering, it is a blend. We have to be policy compliant in terms of things like affordable housing. We're trying to push the boundaries in terms of low energy and what we're delivering on the sites. So we have to do these things as well as generate a commercial return both for Baines and to some degree through the sales and average for South Gloucestershire. So we are doing all of those things, and that's why it's very important when we're going through the planning process and the business case process. We're really looking at all of those risks, making sure our business cases are robust and that we can deliver those aspirations that are set out there. But yes, the South Gloucestershire thing has come along to help us be more sustainable and to ensure the company can continue to deliver, through those peaks and troughs.
Can I just add? Yeah, do you mind if I add something to that? Because I found myself, and Tim and Simon would have missed former Councillor Goodman at the start of this session talking about raising some concerns about AQUIS. And I found myself having to remind myself that I wasn't daydreaming. It was the administration in which he later served which set up AQUIS. And you can go to the decision paper in December 2015. And at that time it talks about the purpose that AQUIS was going to have. The paper is completely silent on any role that AQUIS can play in the delivery of the most important form of affordable housing, which is housing for social rent. And so to reassure you, Councillor Hughes, that the work that's going on in South Gloss is not at the cost of local housing delivery as well. I would say that in addition to delivering the South Gloss housing, what you've now seen with the business case with AQUIS is a very explicit statement that it's now assisting the council in the delivery of in the council's social housing programme, and in addition to delivering the South Gloss houses, when we needed support under this current administration to launch our council house building programme, AQUIS has been able to play a role in that as well, as we've sought to deliver the first social rent properties in this area for 30 years. So the work in South Gloss is not coming at a cost to local, quite the reverse. In fact, we have AQUIS now that's playing a key role in both supporting the council locally and also delivering housing in South Gloss, which is to the win of us all, because of course the developments in South Gloss, the profit from that is feeding back to Baines, as we are the ultimate shareholder. And I think I'll just go one step further, because there's been some confusion about this as well. AQUIS is not the only method by which we bring forward social housing within Bath and North East Somerset. It supports us in some areas, but for example, I mentioned Grosvenor House was a development which I think was taken forward by the council's own team, if I recall, on that particular one. AQUIS wasn't involved in that one. So I just want to sort of give a sort of greater flavour of what's been going on, because this is quite a lot of change has happened in housing and Baines Homes, so the council's own homes programme in the last 2 years, of which AQUIS has played a role.
Yes, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So I guess that just leads to the question then of what is it that AQUIS are bringing to the party if we have different options for developing social housing? What are the advantages of putting it through a business model like AQUIS rather than us managing it ourselves?
And everything is now taken on a case-by-case basis. So the work we are doing in Englishcombe on bringing forward the new scheme there is being done by the council's major delivery team. The work we are doing on, as you can see in the pipeline that was shared by Tim, you can see a number of units that are being brought forward where the council has decided that it's best in order to ensure the speed of delivery to work through the AQUIS group. The council is developing a range of options, and what we instead do, rather than going to a default option, or provider if you like, we look at the site we're talking about, we're looking at the scheme we wish to bring forward, and then we seek to ascertain what the best methodology of the delivery of that site is.
But the question was, what is the advantage of the AQUIS business model as opposed to us doing it ourselves?
Well, very often, as the paper itself noted back in 2015 with the founding of AQUIS, in some respects the skill set wasn't available in the council. You have to bear in mind that in some instances, because the council went through a period of a large range of redundancies and cutbacks, there were periods where we didn't have the skill set in-house, and actually sometimes AQUIS provides that. In other areas, the council provides it. In other areas, other consultants provide it. But what we do is we take a decision on a case-by-case basis. What I would also say is, and 117 Newbridge Hill is a good example, we would not have delivered the first social
rent properties in our area for 30 years had it not been with Aquis. That was the method that worked in that particular site.
I think, Sean, having the experience of administering the company as shareholder on behalf of the council, there are 4 key benefits. One is capability, and I think the company is set up and structured as a housing delivery vehicle that ensures that it has the capability and skill set, which we didn't have and don't have within the council as an officer cohort, to act as a house builder. The company has that. It has capacity as well, so it has a much more flexible approach to scaling up the capacity of house building than the council does as a direct entity. So it introduces a much broader range of delivery options for the council. The third one is risk management, and the company's ability to manage risk within its balance sheet rather than the council managing it on its balance sheet. So its approach to managing risk is different, which gives it greater flexibility in the marketplace to take those developments forward. So that's a key consideration. And then the fourth one is its certainty that utilising Aquis is structured and mandated to deliver us a policy compliant, sustainable solution to housing, which does meet local housing needs. So when we go to procurement, and if we did that as a council set of officers through the procurement or normal approach we would take, there is a risk that the market doesn't come along and play ball in the same way. So it introduces a lot more control and certainty for the council that when we set an objective, the company delivers to that mandate and meets it through its performance objectives. So it doesn't erode the quantum of affordable housing on a scheme that is delivered in Bath and North East Somerset. It's mandated to deliver a policy compliant solution to affordable housing. It's delivering to our climate emergency and delivering the highest standards of sustainability within its policy context. It's not eroding those, which is the experience in the market. So those really are the 4 benefits of why the company is valuable to the council from a delivery point of view.
Can I just add to this, because Councillor Davis referred to the 2015 report, and actually what hasn't been mentioned so far is if these developments were managed purely at arm's length in the private sector, the council would receive no profit from that arrangement at all. And that's why the Conservative Cabinet in 2015 agreed this, and that's why our administration has not altered, apart from extending the articles of the company to enable it to do more, has not fundamentally altered what was a good, sound principle. Now, the fact that Mr. Goodman was not in the Cabinet at that point is, by the way, the Conservative group, majority group at the time, decided to do this. We had reservations as an opposition party at the time, but those issues were dealt with along the road. And that's why, fundamentally, apart from doing quite a lot of work on the pipeline, over the last 4 years, that's where we have sought to make improvements and just to make the whole thing run more smoothly. But the fundamental principle of creating an arm's length company to generate profit for the council and retain, if you like, the profits generated by development was a sound one. That's why Councillor Garish, who proposed this at the time, actually made a good decision, and that's why we have stuck with it all of these years. So I don't know what Mr. Goodman's beef is. Perhaps he wasn't part of the decision. Perhaps he didn't like it. He's been consistent in not liking it. But frankly, it's irrelevant, because actually the council decided to do what it did. And 8 years on, it's still doing it. And, so I think it's really important we remember that when we hear these speeches, which I've heard before, frankly. And I don't really
Can we move on, please? Councillor Singleton.
No question, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the difference in risk management approach between the council and the company. Can you just expand on that a little bit? I wasn't quite sure I understood the point. What does that difference in risk management look like, and why does it help?
There's a couple of specific areas, but one is around controlling the construction and delivery risk, where the council would typically need to offset that to a party and pay quite a large contribution via a profit share to a third party to do that. So it's much easier because the company is structured and set up to undertake construction activity and manage that construction risk in-house rather than essentially offsetting that to the market. So that's one key area of difference. And the other is around the financing, which I'll probably let Tim step in on, around the loan arrangements, around the scrutiny and the process of the council undertaking house building on the balance sheet is relatively controllable when it's particularly for social rented and the works we're doing on some of the kind of affordable housing programme, a lot of which is actually funded through Homes England grant funding to build affordable housing. But borrowing money to undertake construction and house building on the balance sheet would be quite a challenging process to manage. So the process and utilisation of the company helps the council manage that risk through an appropriate vehicle, and I'll let perhaps Tim step in and explain why that is successful and why it helps to balance that risk for the council.
Yes, indeed. I think that the key thing there is we're able to manage the commercial risk through our approach in a number of ways. One is through the actual business case process itself, we're able to factor in those commercial risks into the business case that ultimately feeds through to things like as Simon said there, the loan arrangements and the things we have in place there. Through the board scrutiny, we have a panel of fully independent board members who are able to bring their skills and expertise to evaluate those business cases and look at those risks and evaluate those risks and feed into the process. We're able to look at structures around tax, VAT, and able to factor those things in, so things that we're able to do as a company that the council wouldn't be able to do because of things like partial exemption risk on VAT, for instance, that we're able to actively pursue and take advantage of as a company. So just the structuring alone enables us to do that. And ultimately, the sort of skills and knowledge within the team and within the contractors we're working with that can factor in to that business case process, that we're able to take a holistic view commercially of that business case when it comes forward.
Yeah. But two questions from me. One is on the risk register. So, very helpful, the risk register. Item 3 is rising, and it's at 16. The algebra is 4 times 4. You make a comment, Tim, or whoever prepared this, and I suspect it's you. While being work is underway for ADL to consider the impact of the expected spike in interest rates during 23-24, looks as if we're in for another quarter, maybe another half, because the US is raising interest rates. So how are you getting on that journey?
So our interest rates that we use, our interest rates are set in a state aid compliant way. So we get our interest, our loans over from Baines or South Gloss using an EU reference rate plus a margin. We've been monitoring very carefully what the Bank of England projections are for interest rates that feed through for that, and we are seeing them peaking off now. So actually 23-24 we expect to be the peaking interest rates, and then during 24-25 and 25-6 we expect them to be falling back to a more normal rate. I don't think we'll be expecting them to fall back as low as they were in prior years, but we are expecting them to normalise more. So we are modelling the different impacts of that peak and rise in interest rates through to when it falls off in terms of what that does to the cash flows of both the sites in delivery and to our ADL rental portfolio.
Okay. Councillor Davis, perhaps you can clear this up then. You've mentioned these different arms that we have of delivering housing. How many properties amongst those different arms has the council delivered? I'm talking Baines, not South Gloucestershire.
Councillor Elliott was next, then Councillor Hodge, Councillor McPhee, and Councillor Blackburn. You sure? I'm sorry, I missed you out earlier because you were on a roll. Councillor Hodge, then.
So it's just about the aim for repurposing commercial estate, and on the dashboard there's quite a lot of amber and pauses, and obviously it's a difficult task, and just wondered if we could have a bit more information on that.
Yes, so we've been working with Simon and the team, and they've identified a number of potential properties in the commercial estate that we could look at for repurposing. Generally, we're looking at repurposing them for residential use, and these are spaces normally above commercial retail on the ground floor. Those properties above the ground floor obviously normally require extensive works to make them into habitable residential accommodation. So there's a whole process to go through, particularly because of the nature of the buildings. They're often listed, so we need to engage with both listed buildings and the planning process to make sure that works. So we have to go through that process. We also have to look at cost. The cost of some of these conversions is quite extensive, and the approach we're taking is all of that cost is 100% loan funded, so it's 100% geared. So we need to ensure that the rentals we will receive from those properties will cover the loan cost. So we've been working through and looking at those, but as you know, in October last year, the underlying interest rates very quickly spiked. That had a big impact on the business cases we were modelling and what that meant. So we've had to go back and look at some of those business cases in light of what was quite a significant spike in the interest rates. We've done that. We've looked at some alternative options. So there is something coming forward called the Local Authority Housing Fund, and a number of those properties fit very well against the Local Authority Housing Fund, which is significantly funded through government grant, 40 or 50%, which really does make those properties much more viable to deliver through that route. So we've got a number there. We've got a number where we're looking at them, and we may be saying to the council, look, actually your best route now might be to look at some form of disposal, because they just do not work as rental in terms of the current market. And others may still continue to work, and we're looking at those. So I think some of those changes, particularly in terms of the ambers, reflect the fact that we're having to look quite closely at those because of the viability, because of the cost of conversion, the cost of borrowing versus the rentals they will generate.
Councillor McPhee.
So, to Councillor Davis, you have 133 properties in total. What proportion of those would be social?
So social rent, the first ones are Newbridge Hill, which are the 7 that came available very recently. If you widen that to affordable, and so therefore also consider the council's supported housing schemes, which I oversee as well, we've got a further 24 units delivered under that, and in addition, because there's the 2 shared ownership properties as well, which again was a first for the council as well, which were last year. June last year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, Councillor Blackburn, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Tom, so to bring you back into this one, that clarification, thanks for giving us that on the 133. Can I just confirm, when we are clarifying our numbers, and this is something we've looked at before, with Aquarius especially taking back effectively Curo properties, and we've got 40 circa rented properties, which are now in private rental, which actually came back from Curo social. In those figures, the 133, things like the Grosvenor site is not included, I would hope, because obviously they were already 21 units being managed by Guinness for social rent. So are those 21 included in your 133 figures?
So,
I just want a clarification.
No, so just to be clear, when I spoke about the 133, these were the housing units delivered by the council or via Aquis. So because the council secured the funding to do the full conversion of Grosvenor House, and it's stayed since its reversion back from Guinness, it's now been converted into a supported housing scheme run by the council. Its 20 units are in that 133.
Okay.
Because they now form part of the council's housing stock.
Okay, but effectively we already had them as social housing pre-council doing it. Well, they were Guinness managed social
the lease
housing.
came back to the council, and the council secured the funding, and I believe those units were actually being closed, and the council secured the funding to repurpose it for supported housing, and that money was secured during 2020.
So we had a 2-year period where they weren't on the social list, because they were previously, because they were delivered by Guinness for 21 units for a very many number of years. That's all. I just wanted clarification, because there was a void for 2 years when they handed it back. We've repurposed it, but we're quoting it in our figures again. It's just great. I've just got the clarification. That's all.
They are absolutely in the 133.
Yeah, right. Just want the clarification. This thing, Tim, about social and affordable, we've touched on it before as a scrutiny group. I just want to get your definition, because I see it, if I look here in item number 3, we're talking about, first, point 1, 8 affordable units on Argyle Works. Can you confirm to me, I mean, I was totally led to believe as a ward councillor that whilst it initially had come to you as a potential development site, it then came specifically as this is a social housing site for 8 social housing. So Councillor Jean Player and I were very for that, very positive about the whole council's approach to social housing and wanted to support it. But it says here affordable. I hope we haven't changed our mind and we're making it affordable. It's social. Great. So I just want to get our definitions right, as we talked about earlier. So when we look further down into point 3, when we look at something like Cotterell Court, are we talking about an affordable housing scheme? Because affordable in Baines is difficult, as we've all touched on. Affordable definition is not for most people. Is that going to be social in your mind, in your plan?
Now, this is your question directed at Tim is exactly, I think, if you don't mind, why I think there is some misunderstanding about this, because this is the council's decision. These are sites which are not transferring to Aquis. These are sites in which the council is now retaining full ownership of the site, and in both Cotterell Court and in Argyle Works, we are contracting with Aquis to build out, well, in the case of Argyle Works, to build out. Cotterell were not quite at that, we're one stage earlier, I believe, with Cotterell Court. But ultimately, the council, because we now have launched a social housing programme, because the council now has its own council house programme, we have decided that these assets are staying as part of the council's new housing stock, and in both of those instances, Cotterell Court and Argyle Works, they will be for social rent as part of the council's council house building programme. Cotterell Court went on an interesting journey, and that's another case where actually you can see our new methodology being applied. The council looks at every asset.
Councillor Davis, we're actually over time now, so if you could keep it brief.
We decided that was the best use for that site was for social housing, not a commercial use for anything else.
That's great. I mean, I just wanted definition, whether it's council or via Aquis. That's great to know. I think all of us were looking for definition. From a scrutiny point of view, Tim, I'm just keen to understand Theobald House in terms of what refurbishment. There was a Baines tender in 2021 and works were deemed to have been done in 22 extensively for works in Theobald House. Maybe that didn't happen.
I think there was a delay to the works being done, and those works are underway now at the moment. Again, that's another one. It's staying in council ownership. That's going to be for temporary accommodation, and the work's being contracted through Aquis.
So did Aquis win that tender back in 21 then? Because the tender closed at the end of 21. It was then
I believe the tender you're referring to is, I assume, the contractor that Aquis then appointed, I would assume. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so just clarify, we have a contractor delivering the physical works. We're project managing
Oh yeah, as you do, and you want, yeah, no, I get that too, that's fine. I'm trying to be nitpicky, I'm just trying to understand. When I see these things, scrutiny is about dwelling down a little bit, in my mind.
And can I just make a point, those are the questions that have come up with us as well.
Yes,
so, the clarification is very...
Item 4, about delivering at Sladebrook. I'm not sure, Tim, whether you've had the opportunity to go back and talk to the occupiers and understand their use of the properties and how they've been impacted with things which aren't quite as perfect as we'd like to have seen on the delivery brochure, because zero carbon is great, but they're all plugging in electric oil-filled radiators because the radiators can't deliver the heat right. That's one thing I think we should be investigating and talking to those homeowners, just to understand, because heat pumps and radiators, not usually a good mix, and that's been proven from the feedback I've got from those residents, because they haven't plug-in external radiators. Just looking here, the ones you're talking about, maybe Councillor Davis, this would be yours, the 50% void level we've got for 10 rental units. Are they rental that we're doing private, that are potentially going across?
They will be rental properties in Aquarius.
They'll go into Aquarius. At the moment, we've got 50%. Point number 6.
Sorry. Let me just check which bit of the pipeline are you...
Point number 6 on the sheet that you shared with us all.
For the dashboard?
Yeah.
Let me just go... beg your pardon, Councillor Blackburn, which ones?
Yeah, currently working with Baines to take on the management of 10 rental units as part of the corporate property acquisition made by the council. These currently have a 50% void. I'm just interested to know what type of rental units they are and what we intend them to be through Aquis.
I think these are, I'm not sure about the intended ultimate purpose, but these are the ones that came back to us with the post office purchase, if I recall. Yeah.
Okay, so and they were previous private rentals, Tim, do you know? I mean, obviously there's still 50% of them rented out if we've got 50% void.
I think they're sitting tenants, aren't they?
It's a mixture of both. So it's as part of the old former post office acquisition. It came back with a vacant HMO, and I think it is 6 or 7 occupied flats, and Aquis have been helping us. So what we've been trying is to work through the works to ensure that we can get the HMO back into beneficial use and secure that. That's the 50% void bit at the moment, because half of it is empty because and that needs some fire compliance works undertaken to enable that to be brought back in. Aquis can then hold and manage those properties on behalf of the council while we progress the development process through to completion for the future of that building.
Great, thank you. Just give some clarification. Down on to 9. Great that we got that £1 million return, and actually I believe that £1 million was what we were told you've already got through ACL for Riverside, because it's $1 million there and we should have $1 million next year. That's the whole point of making the holding company. So hopefully going on after that, all your funds from South Gloss are going to start coming in. So to answer Councillor Hodges' hope that we're going to get more than $1 million each year, I think we're in line maybe to get more. That'd be great. Just wanted to look at that model of fixing that price. You say that Baines got that £100,000 benefit at Sladebrook for the 2 shared ownership properties. Has that ultimately meant that the purchasers of the 50% of shared ownership have ultimately got an even bigger discount? Are they the ones that personally have got that benefit and not us as a council? Just be interested to understand that, because if for argument's sake the market should have been 500,000 for it and we'd pegged that price at 450, we've sold to 50% to a shared ownership customer at 225, or we sold it to them at 250, which is the market then. Who got the benefit? Can you see where I'm coming from? Does that make sense?
I'd have to go and check that one, because the sale was made from Baines to the shared ownership people, so it was done through. So once we'd sold it to Baines, it was then a contract between Baines and the new shared ownership owners as to what that was. So I'd have to check through back with Simon's team to ascertain what was done.
Just be interesting for maybe us all to make sure we're learning from this process. If we're going to get a benefit from our development company, we keep it as opposed to helping a person buying a property off us.
So Councillor Blackburn will ask
yeah, I think I can.
Simon
I
to give us,
don't know the detail on those two, but I think
as
it's a
we're pressed for
valid
time
question.
now. Sorry to speak over you, I apologise. As we're pressed for time now, do you have very many more?
No, just one. The 150 discount achieved on Newbridge, which is great. Obviously, that's after the retention of the 20% development margin. Yeah, just a clarification.
So on Newbridge, we have an overage agreement. So yes, there is a 20% profit margin built into that, but that helps support the dividend. We also have an overage agreement with the council. So after the 1-year defect period, any overage that we've achieved on that, particularly through in that when we've done some really good work on cost control. So if those cost savings do come through, they'll be passed back to the council as 100% overage.
Fantastic, that's good. And you mentioned just in 14, or maybe I'm jumped ahead, 12, one there, the MRP changes in risk. Have we covered that? I think it's noted here, the changes to the MRP on council loans.
So the government have, during the previous year, so back in 2022, the government was looking at the way in which councils could lend money to its companies, and there were some changes that the government made and brought forward. So one was around particularly out-of-area lending. There were many councils who were buying particularly commercial properties out of their area. The government have stopped that. They were also looking at the way in which something called minimum revenue provision, which is a provision the council has to make for repayment of its loans, feeds through. Now, as it happens, we repay our loans as we sell each house, where many local authority housing companies don't repay their funding council loans until they've sold the last house on the site. Right. We don't do that, so we're not impacted by the changes the government brought in, but some other local authority housing companies are impacted because they roll up interest rates and loans until the final house sale. We don't do that.
Great, it's good news, no risk. And just on the 14, just about procurement activity, local estate agents, can you just enlarge on that? Because obviously everything's been focused on Gregory's up to now.
Yeah, so our first significant tender recently was a tender for the agents for Malmains Drive in South Gloucestershire. We tendered that contract and that was won by Connells, who have not only an office close to the site, they're going to man a show home there and so on. So when we bring forward the big sites, we will tender for agents for each site.
Okay, no more questions? Right, so is there anything else that Councillor Dogood?
Thank you ever so much, Tim. Very helpful, Councillor Davis. Also those explanations. I just feel I've got deja vu here with what's WECA becoming. WECA is becoming such a different organisation. This is becoming such a different organisation. Councillor Samuels alluded to that, how it was set up originally and how it's evolved. I'm not convinced that we've got the expertise to do a proper job on scrutiny between us and audit at the moment. And I mean, I've got my own views that maybe we should have a 3 from one, 3 from another, and a group specifically looking at AQUIS. But rather than the pillars of wisdom or not from Councillor Winston Dugan, I'd like to push it to the officers to look at terms of reference about how really we go about scrutiny in the new administration. And you may want to consult with various members of the committee here, but I think we need to have a relook to do our job properly, because there's a special onus on us and audit. This is 100% owned, and it's different. And Baines has been very well, prudently managed under various administrations. We look down the road in Bristol, I know we're on camera here, but things have gone awry on certain different areas, not to do with homes, but also elsewhere in the kingdom. And I do think we've got a special responsibility to residents and council taxpayers to make sure we're doing a thorough job. So I want to propose that we put it to the officers to look at terms of reference going forward for the new administration.
And I would second that. Can I have a vote on that, please? So that's unanimous. So if you could sort that out for us, we'd be most grateful. Right, so it just brings me to close the meeting. What I would like to do is thank all the officers who patiently answered all our questions, and thank obviously the Cabinet members who've been here and updated us diligently, and also everybody who've been members of the scrutiny panel. I thank you very, very much for all your contributions, and hopefully see you on the other side.